The rain poured in sheets, drumming against the shattered windows of the abandoned mall. Inside, 6 survivors huddled together in the dim light of a dying lantern. Their faces were gaunt, their bodies exhausted from weeks of running. This place, this crumbling, looted shopping center, was their best hope for survival. Ethan, the de facto leader, scanned the room. His sharp eyes lingered on each of them, measuring, judging. Trust was a luxury they could no longer afford. "We've got to ration what's left," he said, his voice firm. "Food, water, ammo, it has to last." Across from him, Lila clutched a rusted crowbar, her fingers tightening around the metal. "We wouldn't have to ration if someone hadn't wasted bullets on that last horde." She shot a glare at Mason, a former security guard who had taken it upon himself to protect the group. Mason scoffed. "You'd rather I let them tear us apart?" "It's not about that," muttered Claire, a soft-spoken woman who had been a nurse before the world fell apart. "It's about survival. Every decision matters." The air was thick with tension. Outside, a low moan echoed through the mall's ruined corridors. The undead were out there, always lurking, always waiting. But tonight, the bigger threat wasn't the monsters beyond the doors. It was the people inside. Fractured trust. As the group settled in, Oliver, a wiry teenager, rummaged through their supplies. "We're down to 3 cans of beans, half a bottle of water, and 1 pack of crackers." He frowned. "This won't last." Silence. No one wanted to be the one to say what they were all thinking. "We need a supply run," Ethan finally said. Mason exhaled sharply. "That's a death sentence. The streets are crawling with those things. Then we stay here and starve?" Lila snapped. "Great plan, genius." Ethan raised a hand. "Enough. We'll go in pairs. Quick, quiet, and we avoid trouble." A plan was set. Mason and Oliver would search the grocery store on the lower level, while Ethan and Claire checked the sporting goods store for weapons. Lila and Sam, a quiet man who rarely spoke, would guard the entrance. But as they split up, an uneasy feeling settled over Ethan. Something was wrong. A dangerous discovery. Ethan and Claire moved through the sporting goods store, stepping over broken glass and toppled shelves. A faint, musty stench filled the air, old death and decay. Claire knelt by a counter, rummaging through drawers. "Jackpot," she whispered, holding up a hunting knife. Ethan turned, his gaze sweeping the room. "We should," he stopped. Footsteps. Not zombies. Too careful, too measured. Someone else was here. Ethan grabbed Claire's arm and pulled her into the shadows. Seconds later, a figure emerged from the darkness. A man, filthy, clad in torn clothes, a shotgun slung over his shoulder. "Don't move," Ethan commanded, stepping forward, his knife raised. The stranger froze, his hands up. "I'm not here to hurt you." His voice was hoarse. "But if you don't let me explain, we're all dead." A warning too late. Back at the entrance, Lila shifted restlessly, gripping her crowbar. "Something feels off," she muttered. Sam didn't reply. He was staring out into the rain, his jaw tight. Lila followed his gaze, and her blood ran cold. A dark figure moved among the wreckage outside. Then another. Then more. Shadows in the storm, moving closer. Zombies. Dozens of them. "Shit," Lila breathed. "We have to warn the others." Before she could turn, Sam grabbed her wrist. His grip was strong. Too strong. Lila's eyes widened as she realized, Sam wasn't looking at the zombies. He was looking at her. And he was smiling. The rain masked the sound of approaching death, but Lila's instincts screamed at her, something was wrong. Sam's grip tightened around her wrist. His eyes held something cold, something calculating. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, yanking her arm free. Sam didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back, raising his hands in a mock gesture of peace. "Relax," he murmured, his voice low. "No need to panic." Panic? Lila barely had time to process before the first zombie slammed against the mall's glass entrance. Then another. And another. Thunder rumbled overhead as a sea of undead staggered toward them, their rotting hands pressing against the glass, smearing it with filth and blood. The barricade wouldn't hold for long. Lila turned back to Sam. "Did you do this?" His silence was answer enough. "Why?" she demanded, her heart pounding. Finally, he spoke. "Because someone had to." Then he ran. Betrayal in the dark. Lila cursed under her breath and sprinted toward the mall's interior. If she didn't warn the others, they'd all be trapped. Meanwhile, Ethan and Claire were still facing off against the mysterious stranger in the sporting goods store. "I swear, I'm not your enemy," the man said, keeping his hands up. "But you need to listen. You're not safe here." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "We already know that." "No," the man said urgently. "You don't understand. One of your own sold you out." Ethan and Claire exchanged a glance. "Who?" Ethan demanded. The man hesitated. "I don't know his name. But he made a deal with another group, led them straight to you." Before Ethan could react, a scream echoed through the mall. "Lila!" Ethan didn't hesitate, he bolted toward the sound, Claire close behind. The first casualty. Mason and Oliver were still scavenging on the lower level when they heard the commotion. "You hear that?" Oliver whispered. Mason nodded. "Come on." They crept toward the escalators, but before they could reach them, movement in the shadows caught their attention. "Stay close," Mason murmured. A figure staggered out of the darkness, soaked from the rain, his clothes ripped. His face was barely visible beneath the flickering emergency lights. "Sam?" Oliver asked hesitantly. Sam didn't answer. Mason took a cautious step forward. "Where's Lila?" Sam smiled. "Gone." Something about the way he said it made Mason's blood run cold. Then Sam lunged. Mason barely had time to react before Sam's knife sliced through the air. He dodged, but the blade still grazed his arm. Oliver stumbled backward. "What the hell?" Sam didn't stop, he went for Mason again, this time aiming for his throat. Mason blocked the attack and slammed his fist into Sam's gut. The impact sent Sam staggering, but he laughed, a twisted, eerie sound. "You're all dead anyway," he spat. "Might as well speed things up." Mason didn't waste time with questions. He swung his gun up and fired. Sam dropped. Dead. Oliver's breathing was ragged. Why did he do that? What the hell is happening? Mason wiped the blood from his arm. "I don't know." He turned toward the escalators. "But we need to find the others. Now." Nowhere left to run. Ethan, Claire, and the stranger reached the entrance just as the first glass panel shattered. The undead poured in. "Move!" Ethan yelled, grabbing Lila and pulling her back. "There's too many," Claire gasped, eyes wide with panic. Ethan's mind raced. The mall was no longer safe. They had two options, fight, or run. And running might mean leaving someone behind. The first zombie crashed through the shattered glass, its decayed body collapsing onto the floor in a heap of torn flesh and broken bones. Then another came, then another. Within seconds, the mall's entrance was a flood of undead, their rotting mouths opening and closing hungrily as they clawed forward. Ethan pulled Lila to her feet. "We need to go. Now." Mason and Oliver appeared at the top of the escalator, breathing heavily. Mason's gun was still smoking. "What the hell is going on?" Mason shouted over the noise. Sam was working against us. Lila blurted. He lured them here. Mason's jaw tightened. Yeah. We figured that out. Ethan didn't waste time asking how. We need an escape route. The mysterious stranger who had warned Ethan stepped forward. There's a maintenance tunnel in the back. If we move fast, we can lose them. Ethan turned to him, hesitation flickering in his eyes. Why should we trust you? The man sighed, glancing at the horde pouring in. You don't have a choice. A desperate escape. The group sprinted through the mall, weaving through overturned shelves and shattered debris. The sound of shuffling feet and guttural moans filled the air, growing closer with each passing second. Oliver tripped over a fallen mannequin, barely catching himself. Mason grabbed his arm and yanked him back up. Keep moving, kid. They reached the back hallways of the mall, where the maintenance corridors stretched in a maze of rusted doors and dimly lit pathways. The stranger led them down a narrow hallway and stopped in front of a metal door. Through here, he said, pulling it open. Ethan hesitated. This could be a trap. The man seemed to sense his suspicion. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't be standing in front of a horde of zombies trying to help you escape. Fair enough. Ethan motioned for everyone to move. One by one, the survivors filed through the doorway. Lila, Claire, Oliver, Mason. Ethan stepped through last and slammed the door shut just as the undead reached them. The sounds of pounding fists and snarling filled the air. The door trembled under the weight of the horde, but it held, for now. For the first time in hours, they had a moment to breathe. Who is he? The tunnel was dark and smelled of mildew and decay. Flickering emergency lights barely illuminated the way forward. Ethan turned to the stranger. Start talking. Who are you? The man exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. Name's Daniel. I was part of another group, not far from here. We were attacked, by people, not zombies. Claire frowned. People? Daniel nodded grimly. A group of raiders. They take what they want, kill whoever gets in their way. They've been watching this place. That's why I came, someone in your group made a deal with them. The room went silent. We know it was Sam, Mason said. But he's dead now. Daniel shook his head. That doesn't mean the deal is off. Those raiders will still come. And if they think you have anything valuable, they won't stop until they get it. Lila crossed her arms. Great. So now we have zombies outside and killers coming for us. What else? Daniel hesitated. They're not just coming for supplies. He looked at the group. They're coming for you. The real threat. A heavy silence filled the room. We should keep moving, Ethan finally said. How far do these tunnels go? Daniel gestured down the dim corridor. There's an exit about a mile from here. It leads out to the old train yard. If we make it there, we can figure out our next move. Ethan nodded. Then we move. But as they walked, paranoia crept into the group. They had trusted Sam, and he betrayed them. Now they were following another stranger. Was Daniel telling the truth? Or was this another trap? The tunnel stretched ahead, dark and damp, the air thick with mildew and decay. Each step echoed through the narrow corridor, amplifying the uneasy silence between the survivors. Ethan led the way, gripping his knife tightly. Behind him, Mason carried his pistol, eyes darting around for any signs of movement. Lila and Claire walked together, whispering to each other in hushed tones. Oliver, the youngest, stayed close to Mason. And then there was Daniel. The man they had just met. The one who claimed to have saved them. Ethan's mind raced. Can we trust him? Sam had already betrayed them. How could they be sure Daniel wasn't leading them into another trap? Doubt and suspicion. Lila broke the silence. So, Daniel. What exactly did you do before all this? Daniel glanced over his shoulder. Before the world went to hell? I was a cop. Mason scoffed. Figures. Daniel arched a brow. Something wrong with that? Mason smirked. Just don't see many cops making it this far. Daniel didn't react. I was in the middle of an investigation when the outbreak started. The criminals I was after became the least of my problems. Claire folded her arms. And this raider group you warned us about. You said they were coming for us. Why? Daniel hesitated. They take survivors. Sometimes to join them. Sometimes, for other things. A cold shiver ran down Oliver's spine. Other things? Daniel didn't answer. Ethan stopped walking. The tunnel was splitting into two paths. One led into deeper darkness, the other had a faint glimmer of light at the end. Daniel pointed to the darker path. That way leads to the train yard. Ethan didn't move. How do we know you're not leading us straight into a trap? Daniel met his gaze, his expression unreadable. You don't. Silence. Then. Bang. A gunshot rang through the tunnel. Oliver screamed. Claire gasped. Lila dropped to her knees. Blood pooled beneath her. Chaos erupts. What the hell? Ethan spun, knife raised. Mason held his pistol up, but not at Daniel. At Oliver. The teenager stood frozen, eyes wide, gun shaking in his hands. Claire grabbed Lila, pressing her hands against the wound. You shot her? What is wrong with you? Oliver's lips trembled. I didn't mean to. I swear. I just. Mason knocked the gun out of his hands. You little idiot. Lila groaned, pain twisting her face. Someone take care of this before I bleed out. Ethan turned to Oliver. Why the hell were you holding a gun? Oliver shook his head frantically. Mason gave it to me. I got scared. Mason looked furious. I told you to hold it for protection, not start shooting our own people. Daniel knelt beside Lila. We need to stop the bleeding or she won't make it. Claire was already pulling out her med kit. I can do it, but I need time. Ethan gritted his teeth. Time was something they didn't have. A bigger threat looms. Then. A sound. A low, distant whistle. It echoed through the tunnel, bouncing off the walls. Ethan's blood turned to ice. What was that? Oliver whispered. Daniel's face darkened. Them. Another whistle. Closer this time. Then, footsteps. Boots. Not shuffling like zombies. These were steady. Controlled. The raiders were here. Ethan grabbed Oliver and shoved him against the wall. I'll deal with you later. He turned to the others. We need to move. Now. Lila groaned. I can't run. Claire tightened the bandage around her wound. Then someone carries her. Mason nodded. I got her. Ethan faced Daniel. Which way? Daniel pointed down the tunnel. Go. I'll hold them off. Ethan narrowed his eyes. You expect me to trust you now? Daniel didn't answer. He just cocked his gun and took position by the tunnel entrance. The footsteps were getting closer. There was no time to argue. Ethan clenched his jaw. If Daniel was lying, they were all dead. Go. Daniel barked. Ethan turned. Move. The group ran, vanishing into the darkness. Behind them, Daniel took a deep breath, raised his gun, and aimed at the approaching shadows. Then the first raider appeared. And the real fight began. Ethan didn't look back. He couldn't. The echoes of gunfire filled the tunnel behind them, each shot sending a fresh wave of adrenaline through his veins. Mason carried Lila, her breaths coming in ragged gasps as she clutched her wounded side. Claire ran beside them, holding the med kit tight to her chest. Oliver trailed behind, his face pale, his hands still shaking from the gunshot that had nearly killed one of their own. The tunnel twisted ahead, leading them deeper into darkness. The flickering emergency lights above cast eerie shadows along the damp walls. "Where's the exit?" Mason grunted, adjusting his grip on Lila. "You said we were close." Ethan scanned the dimly lit corridor. The air smelled of rust and mold. Something isn't right. Then he saw it. A metal gate. Locked. They were trapped. The enemy closes in. Ethan rattled the gate. "Damn it. It's shut tight." Mason swore under his breath. "Can we break it?" Oliver hesitated. "Maybe I can." A voice echoed from the darkness behind them. Well. Look what we have here." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. From the tunnel's shadows, they emerged. 5 figures, dressed in makeshift armor, leather jackets reinforced with metal plates, belts lined with knives and guns. Their faces were covered with skull-printed masks. Raiders. The leader stepped forward, holding a massive machete. His cold, amused eyes locked onto the survivors. "You must be the ones Daniel was protecting," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "Shame he had to die for nothing." Claire gasped. "Daniel's dead?" The raider leader smirked. "Oh, he fought like hell. But in the end, bullets beat bravery." Ethan clenched his fists. Was Daniel really dead? He wanted to doubt it, but deep down, he knew the truth. They were alone now. Desperate measures. The raiders moved closer. Ethan tightened his grip on his knife. Mason slowly shifted Lila's weight, preparing to fight despite her injury. Claire and Oliver stood frozen, fear in their eyes. The leader tilted his head. "No need for violence. Hand over your weapons, and we might let you live." Ethan didn't believe that for a second. The raiders would kill them, or worse. He glanced at Mason. A silent understanding passed between them. They had to fight. Ethan took a slow step forward. "Fine. We surrender." Mason frowned but stayed silent. The leader smirked. "Smart choice." Ethan knelt, placing his knife on the ground. Mason hesitated but followed, setting his gun down. Claire and Oliver did the same. The raiders stepped closer, weapons lowered. Then Ethan moved. In one swift motion, he snatched his knife and lunged. The blade sank deep into the leader's chest. The raider gasped, eyes wide in shock. Blood gurgled from his lips as he stumbled backward. Chaos erupted. Mason grabbed his pistol and fired. Bang! One raider dropped. Oliver tackled another, knocking him off balance. Claire swung her med kit, smashing it into a raider's face. The remaining raiders recovered quickly. One raised a rifle. Bang! The bullet whizzed past Ethan's ear. They needed to end this fast. A risky gamble. Mason shoved a raider against the wall and shot him point blank. Blood sprayed across the tunnel. Ethan ducked as another raider swung a crowbar at him. He rolled, grabbed the fallen leader's machete, and slashed. The raider screamed as the blade cut deep. Oliver wrestled on the ground with another attacker. The raider pinned him, raising a knife. Bang! A gunshot rang out. The raider collapsed, a bullet hole in his skull. Oliver looked up, panting. Lila, weak, pale, but still alive, held the smoking gun. Damn, she muttered. That hurt. The tunnel fell silent. The raiders were dead. A narrow escape. Ethan wiped the blood from his face and turned back to the gate. Mason kicked one of the raider corpses and found keys. Got it, he said, unlocking the gate. They rushed through, dragging Lila along. Beyond the tunnel was a massive train yard, rusted tracks stretching under the pale moonlight. Old train cars stood abandoned, covered in graffiti and decay. They were out. But for how long? Ethan looked at his blood-stained hands. They had survived this fight. But who would betray them next? The survivors staggered into the abandoned train yard, their breaths heavy, their bodies worn. Lila groaned as Mason carefully set her down on an overturned crate. Her wound was bad, but she was still alive, barely. The moon cast eerie shadows over the rusting train cars, stretching into the distance like silent ghosts of the past. The night air was thick with the stench of rot, gasoline, and something else, something worse. Death. Ethan wiped blood from his hands, his mind racing. The raiders were dead, but that didn't mean they were safe. Mason took a deep breath. We need a plan. Those guys weren't alone. More could be coming. Oliver's voice was barely a whisper. What if they already know we're here? The thought sent a chill through the group. They weren't out of danger. Not even close. A hidden threat. Claire crouched beside Lila, checking her wound. She needs real medical attention, or this is going to get infected. Ethan glanced around. We need shelter. Somewhere defensible. Oliver's eyes landed on an old train engine at the far end of the yard. What about there? Mason nodded. It's better than being out in the open. Slowly, they made their way toward the rusting locomotive, every step filled with tension. Ethan was the first to climb up. He peered inside the darkened cabin. And froze. A gun pressed against his temple. Drop your weapons, a voice growled from the shadows. Ethan's heart pounded. Another ambush? He slowly raised his hands. We don't want trouble. The figure stepped into the dim moonlight. It was a woman. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, a scar running down her cheek. She wore a tattered military jacket, her finger tight on the trigger of a rifle. Trouble follows people like you, she said coldly. Ethan swallowed hard. Who are you? She didn't answer. Instead, she whistled. From the surrounding train cars, more survivors emerged, at least 6 of them, all armed. Claire gasped. We're surrounded. Mason cursed under his breath. Damn it. The negotiation. The woman finally lowered her gun. You killed those raiders, didn't you? Ethan hesitated. Yeah. The woman smirked. Good. We've been hunting those bastards for weeks. Ethan exchanged a look with Mason. Were they allies? Or just another threat? The woman took a step forward. My name's Rebecca. I lead this group. And right now, you're in our territory. Ethan's mind raced. We didn't mean to intrude. We were just trying to escape. Rebecca studied them. Her gaze lingered on Lila, who was barely conscious. She needs help, Rebecca said. We have supplies. A safe place. Mason narrowed his eyes. What's the catch? Rebecca smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. There's always a catch, she admitted. A dangerous proposal. Rebecca leaned against the rusting train car, crossing her arms. I'm offering you a deal, she said. We take you in. Patch up your friend. Give you food, water, and shelter. Ethan's stomach twisted. And in return? Rebecca's smile faded. You help us kill the rest of the raiders. Silence fell over the group. Oliver looked terrified. Claire's hands trembled. Mason's jaw tightened. Ethan exhaled. They had just barely survived one battle. And now she wanted them to fight again? Mason crossed his arms. We don't even know you. Rebecca's expression darkened. You don't have a choice. Ethan glanced at Lila, her breathing shallow. If they said no, would Rebecca just take what she wanted by force? He met Rebecca's gaze. I need to talk to my group. Rebecca gave a small nod. You have 10 minutes. Then I need an answer. The vote. Ethan gathered the group near the train engine, lowering his voice. What do we do? Mason ran a hand through his hair. I don't like this. We barely made it out last time. Claire glanced at Lila. But we need the supplies. Oliver hesitated. Maybe we can just take what we need and leave? Mason scoffed. You really think they'll let us walk away? Ethan's hands curled into fists. Every option was dangerous. Help Rebecca fight? Risk death? Refuse? They might turn on us. Try to run? Where would they go? His stomach twisted. There was no right answer. Finally, he spoke. We stay, Ethan said. But we play it smart. We act like we're on their side, but the second things go wrong, we leave. Mason nodded slowly. Fine. Claire sighed. I hope we don't regret this. Ethan turned back to Rebecca. We'll help you, he said. Rebecca smiled. Good choice. But as she turned away, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a deal with the devil. The tension in the air was thick as Ethan, Mason, Claire, and Oliver followed Rebecca and her group through the train yard. The old railway station, once a hub of life, was now a crumbling relic of a dead world. The moon cast eerie shadows over rusted train cars, making them look like lurking monsters in the dark. Lila had been taken to Rebecca's makeshift base, a hidden bunker beneath an abandoned train depot, where her people promised to treat her wound. But even with that assurance, Ethan's gut told him something was off. Rebecca had saved them. But at what cost? The plan for war. Inside the bunker, a table was covered in maps and weapons. Rebecca placed a battered map down, pointing at a fortified warehouse just outside the city. That's where the raiders regroup, she explained. They won't be expecting an attack so soon. Mason studied the map. And you expect us to just waltz in and kill them all? Rebecca smirked. We hit them fast and hard. Before they know what's happening, we wipe them out. Claire folded her arms. And you're sure we can trust you? Rebecca's eyes darkened. I should be asking you the same thing. The room went silent. Ethan glanced at his group. Claire looked uneasy. Mason's jaw was clenched. Oliver was fidgeting, avoiding eye contact. Something wasn't right. And then, Rebecca dropped a bombshell. One of you is working with the raiders. The accusation. The words hit like a gunshot. Ethan's breath caught. What? Rebecca's soldiers tensed, their hands hovering over their weapons. Mason's face twisted in anger. That's a damn lie. Rebecca shook her head. We intercepted a radio transmission before we found you. The raiders knew exactly where you were. She let the words sink in. Someone in your group is feeding them information. Oliver took a step back. That's crazy. We'd never. Would you? Rebecca cut in, her gaze locked onto Oliver. The youngest of the group froze. Everyone turned to him. No. No, I wouldn't, Oliver stammered. His hands trembled. I swear, it's not me. Mason took a step toward him. Then why the hell are you so nervous? Oliver swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the room. He looked like a trapped animal. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Was it really Oliver? Or was Rebecca trying to turn them against each other? The truth comes out. Rebecca gestured to one of her men. The soldier tossed a radio onto the table. "This was found in your bag, kid," she said coldly. Oliver's face drained of color. I didn't put that there," he shouted. But it was too late. Mason grabbed Oliver by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You've been working with them?" Mason roared. Oliver shook his head frantically. "I swear, I didn't. I don't know how that got there." Ethan's mind raced. He had known Oliver since the early days of the outbreak. The kid was scared, but he wasn't a traitor. But now, he wasn't so sure. Rebecca's men raised their guns. "We don't take chances," Rebecca said, her voice like ice. "We execute traitors." Oliver panicked. "No. Please. You have to believe me." He looked to Ethan. "Ethan, please." Ethan clenched his fists. He had to make a choice. The betrayal within a betrayal. Mason tightened his grip. "We can't risk it. We should." Bang! The sound shattered the room. For a second, nobody moved. Then, Rebecca gasped. A dark red stain spread across her chest. She stumbled back, eyes wide in shock. Oliver stood there, gun in his trembling hands. He had shot Rebecca. All hell breaks loose. Rebecca collapsed. Her men opened fire. Ethan dove for cover as bullets tore through the bunker. Mason yanked Oliver away just as a soldier fired, missing by inches. Claire screamed, grabbing the med kit and bolting for the exit. The whole room was in chaos. Ethan grabbed his knife and slashed at a soldier's leg, bringing him down. Mason fired his pistol, hitting another in the chest. Oliver stood frozen, staring at the gun in his hands. He had just killed someone. "Oliver, move!" Ethan shouted. The kid snapped out of it and ran. They had to get out. The escape. Ethan kicked open the bunker door. Outside, the train yard was swarming with Rebecca's people. They had seconds before they were cut down. Then, Mason pointed at an old train car. "There. We can lock ourselves in." They sprinted. Bullets whizzed past. Claire was the first to reach the train. She wrenched the door open and climbed inside. Ethan shoved Oliver in. Mason fired one last shot, hitting an approaching soldier in the shoulder. Then he and Ethan jumped inside, slamming the door shut. Outside, Rebecca's people pounded on the metal walls. They were trapped. And now, they had an entire army hunting them down. The train car shook as Rebecca's people pounded on the metal walls. Gunfire rattled the night air, bullets punching holes through the rusting steel. Inside, Ethan, Mason, Claire, and Oliver crouched in the darkness, their breaths ragged, their bodies covered in blood and sweat. Lila was still missing, wounded and left behind in Rebecca's bunker. Outside, a voice screamed. "Come out, and we'll make it quick." Ethan knew that was a lie. Mason reloaded his pistol, jaw clenched. "We can't stay here." Oliver sat against the wall, shaking. His hands were still stained with Rebecca's blood. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I didn't mean to kill her." Mason shot him a look. "You put a bullet in her chest. That's not an accident." Oliver opened his mouth, but Claire cut in. "This isn't the time for that. We need to find a way out." Ethan peeked through a hole in the metal wall. The train yard was swarming with armed survivors. There was no way they could fight their way out. But then, he saw it. A fuel tanker. Half covered in shadows, abandoned on the tracks. An idea clicked in Ethan's mind. "We make a run for that tanker," he said. "If we can blow it, it'll give us the distraction we need." Mason's lips curled into a grin. Now that's a plan. Oliver swallowed hard. We won't all make it. Ethan met his gaze. That's the risk we take. No one argued. They all knew, there was no other choice. The last betrayal. Mason kicked the train door open. Gunfire immediately erupted. The group sprinted into the open, dodging bullets as they weaved between rusting train cars. Sparks flew as rounds ricocheted off the metal. Ethan led the charge, heading straight for the fuel tanker. He reached it first and yanked the valve open, letting gasoline spill across the ground. Mason covered him, firing at their attackers. Hurry up. Claire pulled Oliver forward, but he suddenly stopped. I can't. Claire's eyes widened. What? Oliver stepped back, raising his hands. I called the raiders, he whispered. I thought they'd take us in. Ethan froze. Mason turned, gun raised. You son of a... Oliver shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't know they'd... Before he could finish, a gunshot rang out. Oliver's head snapped back. Blood splattered onto Claire's face. Rebecca's second-in-command stood behind him, rifle smoking. Oliver's body crumpled to the ground. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. Bang! The man fell, a bullet between his eyes. Mason didn't waste time. He lit a flare and tossed it into the spreading pool of gasoline. The explosion. Boom! The tanker exploded, sending a fireball into the sky. The shockwave ripped through the yard, knocking people off their feet. Flames roared, consuming everything in their path. Rebecca's people screamed as fire and debris rained down. Ethan grabbed Claire, dragging her away. Mason followed, shielding his face from the heat. They ran. Through the wreckage. Through the chaos. Through the fire and the screams. They ran until their lungs burned, until the train yard was far behind them. The final goodbye. By dawn, they had reached an abandoned overpass. Mason collapsed against the railing, breathing hard. Claire sat down, eyes empty, her hands still stained with Oliver's blood. Ethan stared out at the ruined city ahead. Lila was gone. Oliver was dead. And trust? Trust was just a myth in this world. Mason broke the silence. What now? Ethan closed his eyes. Then, without looking back, he started walking. Mason and Claire followed. There was no safety. No peace. Only survival. And in a world overrun by the undead, one truth remained. No one can be trusted. The end.